Hey, welcome back to Real Food Mental Health with Cody Cox. Do you or somebody you know have the need of having background noise all the time, either in the form of TV or music, or maybe just a fan blowing to go to sleep? Today's episode is about the power of silence, slowing down on purpose, and taking a pause. My guest today is Pamela Dangelmaier. She is a certified life coach, mindfulness practitioner, and motivational speaker celebrated for her relatable humor and engaging storytelling. And I can vouch for her storytelling. If you have not heard her TEDx talk, go listen to it. It's great. With a graduate certificate in mindfulness-based teaching and learning from UFV, where she earned the award for outstanding achievement, and further training from Martha Beck's Wayfinder program, Pamela combines her expertise with warmth and accessibility, making complex ideas easy to grasp and apply. As a founding member of the Mindful Coach Association and a member of the American Mindfulness Research Association, Pamela is passionate about helping others find clarity, balance, and purpose. She empowers audiences worldwide to unlock their potential and live more fulfilling lives. A TEDx speaker, e-commerce entrepreneur, and published novelist, Pamela credits her diverse achievements to the mindfulness techniques that inspire her daily to embrace life's adventures fully. And we cover some of those techniques in today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Real Food Mental Health Podcast, where we explore the powerful connection between mental and physical health. My name is Cody Cox, a holistic nutritional psychotherapist, and I'm here to guide you on a journey to true wellness, mind, body, and spirit. If you're tired of quick fixes and want real solutions that address the root cause, you're in the right place. Let's get started on your path to lasting wellness. Welcome back to Real Food Mental Health with Cody Cox. Today I'm talking with Pamela Dangelmaier. Welcome, Pamela.
Well, thank you, Cody, for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about your background. I watched your TEDx talk. It was great.
Thank you.
How did you get into the mindfulness, the silence, the things that
hmm
you teach?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because, of course, people often want to know, well, how did you even get involved in this and why are you so passionate about it? I actually think that I got involved in mindfulness or was interested in mindfulness really, truly since I was a child. And if your listeners actually do tune in and watch my TEDx talk, which is called Is There More to Silence Than Just Silence? I actually go through stages in my life where, although I may not have been wholly aware of it consciously, but I have often been drawn to mindfulness techniques, and in particular to the power of intentional silence. And so I went through my life doing all the things that, some people normally do growing up, going to school, going to university. I traveled some, and then I started a business. I became an entrepreneur. And it was truly, I think, at that point in my life when I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I was struggling with the stresses and strains of the responsibilities of my work, trying to balance it with my family life and all of that, that I really became drawn to mindfulness. And it has been for me in many ways a lifesaver and a life enhancer. And because of that, I am now on a journey of sharing that power of mindfulness with others because I honestly believe that people can benefit from integrating mindfulness techniques, in particular silence, into their lives. It's what I call the power of the pause.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I believe that too. How long ago was that you found mindfulness?
Um, in terms of the term mindfulness, I guess I didn't really even know that that's what it was. But it was interesting. It was probably about 10 years ago. I was looking to go on a silent retreat. I'd wanted to, invest some time in myself and really explore that. And as I was doing that online search, I came across a program at a university here in Canada, and that was offering actually a graduate studies degree in mindfulness based teaching and learning. And when I started to look at that, I thought, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for, because not only will it help me understand the practices of mindfulness, but also the scientific basis of
Right.
mindfulness and the ability then to bring it to others in various formats and ways that I have done. So, yeah, it's, I would say, intensively, the last 10 years of my life have really been spent focusing a lot on the practice of mindfulness and living it day to day.
And it does seem like in the last 10 years or so, it has grown exponentially in popularity. So, as a licensed psychotherapist myself,
Mm-hmm.
I have seen so many continuing education opportunities
Mm-hmm.
that are on mindfulness. And so it's actually a pretty normal thing in psychotherapy these days. And it's also very well studied. So you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
more of a scientific background, and I think in many cases, people just they think of it as a buzzword or stigmatize it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually does has have some very impressive science behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I found mindfulness, oh, probably a little bit after you, as I think about it. I remember reading a blog. I think I was looking for natural ways to overcome depression or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was talking about mindfulness in their blog, but interestingly, they never explained how to do it. And so, fast forward a few years, I think maybe it was about 2015 when I found that blog. A few years later, 2017, 18, somewhere around there, I finally started seeing apps
Mm-hmm.
to give some free instruction on mindfulness practices. And
Yes.
I've been getting more and more into it ever since. And it's been
Mm-hmm.
a powerful tool to have. I know it's a very simple practice, but the more you do it, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. That last sentence is particularly true, because I sometimes think that when people first come to mindfulness or their understanding of mindfulness, they say, oh, yeah, but that means that I have to commit to 20 to 40 minutes every day meditating. I have to create a space that's just for that. I have to go through some kind of specialized training in order to understand how to do it properly. And I say, okay, that's all fine and good. And perhaps for some people, yes, that's the route to go. But my whole thrust and impetus in doing what I do is to help people understand that it doesn't matter where you do it or how you do it or even for how long you do it. As long as you do your very best to incorporate it into your everyday, the more you do it, the easier it is, and the sooner you will experience the benefits. It's like going to the gym or going for a walk. If we do that every day, then we will feel better. We will feel physically better. We will build our body muscles. We will free our minds sometimes. We'll get fresh air. Mindfulness is very much the same. And it
Mhm.
can be a 5 minute mindful exercise. It can be a 2 minute mindful exercise. And it can be done anywhere. It's not often I will give, when I give my mindfulness courses, people will say, yeah, but I've seen, people, they're sitting on a beach in Bali, they're sitting in a lotus position with incense and candles burning. And is that what I need in order to practice mindfulness? And I say, no. I mean, you could practice mindfulness in the grocery line at the store, or while you're at the bank, or while you're driving, or while you're stirring this, you're creating your dinner at home. You have
Mhm.
opportunities to practice mindfulness anytime, anywhere, whenever you want.
Yeah, I like to call
Mhm.
it a formal versus an informal practice. Either way, it's a
Yeah.
practice. So a
Yes.
formal practice, at least the way I teach it, is it's when you're sitting and you're doing nothing but mindfulness. This
Yeah.
is what we call meditation. An
Correct. Yes.
informal practice is when you're doing something else, but you're being mindful with it. So
Mm-hmm.
so you gave the example of driving. I use that example a lot too, but also just taking a shower, eating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any of these things you can be mindful
Right.
with if you're being
Mm-hmm.
fully present and accepting of the present.
Yes. And thank you for defining that, because I was thinking, some people may be listening and thinking, well, what exactly is mindfulness? What does it mean? And it's exactly as you said. It's having present moment awareness with acceptance. And acceptance is sometimes has a negative tone to it. People say, well, if I have to accept the negative, what does that mean? It simply means being aware of what is without judgment. In other words, if we have feelings of uh, well, you say depression. If we notice we're having feelings of depression, to simply notice it and not pile on top of that, oh, well, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or oh, isn't it terrible that I'm feeling like that? That only actually makes the issue itself worse. So by
Mhm.
simply understanding that these are the feelings that I'm having, it's making my stomach upset, or my breathing is shortened, or I feel like I'm perspirating, whatever it might be, or my thoughts are continually being dragged down. Simply to notice it, because Cody, once we recognize the patterns, then finally we have an opportunity to do something about it. We are not powerless in who we are. We as individuals have great power, and we have the opportunity to make changes once we notice. But until we actually take the time to notice, we are like ships on the ocean without sails. We are just being battered about by whatever the wind and the waves bring our way.
Mhm. So, what would you say to the person who maybe they have had no exposure to mindfulness
Mhm.
so far, but they're interested in it? How would you suggest they get started?
Mhm. Great question. Um, I would say there's a lot of information on the internet about mindfulness. If they're connected to the internet, there's certainly great sites that one can visit. There's great books as well on mindfulness. But I would say if you're just starting out, perhaps just start with breathing techniques in the sense of noticing your breath. In mindfulness, the breath is our anchor. It's the anchor to the present moment, because we don't breathe into the future and we not breathing into the past. We are actually breathing in the here and now. And that is an opportunity for us to really anchor ourselves, as I said, in the now. So simply by noticing your breath for, say, a minute, just noticing you're breathing in and you're breathing out. What does that feel like physically? Do you notice the rhythm of your breath? You're not trying to control it, it's just however you're breathing at this moment in time. And when we focus solely on our breathing, then we are anchored in the present moment. And that is mindfulness. It's
Yeah,
very simple.
it is very simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how about somebody who it seems like I have a lot of people who come back and they say, "Oh, well, mindfulness doesn't work for me. I don't feel better." Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I do feel better, but it's in the moment. And then for the rest of the day, I still feel anxious or stressed or depressed or
Mm-hmm.
angry or whatever it is. What would you say to them?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say let's be grateful for the moments of mindfulness when you, as you said, didn't feel stressed or depressed. And that is a key. That's an opportunity. As I sometimes say to people, look, when you're practicing mindfulness, it gives you an opportunity to have a break from all that's either dragging you down or making you feel anxious or stressed or whatever it might be. It's an opportunity to say to those feelings, those thoughts, hey, you know what? I know you'll be there later, but right now I'm going to experience what it's like to be here without you, or to be here with you and accept you, but not attached to you like Velcro, and carry on with you. I do that during the rest of the day. I have enough of that. But in this moment, I have an opportunity to just be at peace with it. And the more that we do it, the more people will experience it going into their day. I honestly think that people sometimes give up on it too quickly.
Hmm.
Um, it is a long-term process, but anything that is holistic is long-term. You know, mindfulness is not a pill that one can take and instantly resolve your headache. But once we practice it for and be continuous with it, studies have shown, and we mentioned the science before, studies have shown that it will have long-term effects for people. And I'm living proof of that. You know, there was a point in my life when I was living in Europe and I was in a very, very stressful job. And it got to the point where the buzzword burnout wasn't even a buzzword at that time, but that's definitely what I experienced. And it
Mm.
physically manifested itself in a condition called hyperacusis, where I literally heard everything like someone had turned the volume way, way, way up on everything. External sounds, my own physical sounds, the sound of my swallowing sounded like was so loud. Me speaking was almost unbearable. And so, what helped me, in fact, I was forced into it, was to be silent, was to be quiet, was to turn down the volume on all the things that were happening in my home environment, the television, radio, whatever it might be. Just turn it right down. And the silence eventually healed me. And it was one of the nudges for me to realize the power of intentional silence and mindfulness.
Silence can be powerful. I think a lot of people have, I consider it to be a trauma response if they feel like they need to always have background noise. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, I've known a lot of people who they feel the need to have a TV on in the background all the
Mm-hmm.
time or
Mm-hmm.
music playing all the
Mm-hmm.
time. But the silence can be very healing. And it has to be an intentional practice too, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
where maybe you're just turning off that radio while you're driving and you're just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I used to be really into music myself, but now I'm totally content driving down the road in silence.
Mm-hmm. I'm the same way, and then I intentionally will turn on music, that I like to listen to. But more often than not, that I'm silent. Yeah, and I think you touched on a subject that is really important. And again, that comes up in my TEDx talk as well. Is the question, why are we so afraid of silence? I think a lot of people are very afraid of silence. As you said, they want to have the TV on, the radio going. They have to have constant background noise in order to feel comfortable. And I honestly think that what we are afraid of is of what we might actually hear.
Mm,
And that is our own wisdom that will tell us perhaps this job isn't working for you. This relationship needs to change. I need to change. I need to be more physical. I need to perhaps change what I'm eating. There's all of these whispering voices, this internal wisdom that I believe every person has that gets drowned out with the noise. Our
yes.
society is now set up to silence silence. And when we allow silence to be there, it's interesting because silence isn't the absence of something like a vacuum, but it's actually the presence of everything.
Mm.
And when we open to that and we draw a little bit of courage to be with the silence, I think really powerful and profound shifts can happen in people's lives.
It's really interesting as well that pretty much every religion I can think of values silence to some degree.
Hmm.
And I've
Yes.
heard I've heard it said that prayer is like speaking to God,
Hmm.
meditation is listening to God. You need them
Ah,
both.
yes. Yes. And for those who are not religiously affiliated, think of mindfulness as a secular scientific practice.
Yeah.
Because it really does reach through, as you mentioned, Cody. It really is present in all religions in the world, but millions of people practice mindfulness around the world in all different types of religious affiliations and non-affiliations, agnostics, atheists. It really doesn't matter. It's a human thing. In fact, I'd even go as far to say as it's a sentient being thing. Even animals, when you think about it, animals live for the most part in silence.
It's funny that you said that. I was just
Hmm.
thinking about animals.
Hmm. Yeah.
And as a holistic nutritionist, so I'm a nutritionist and a psychotherapist, I
Hmm.
often think about how animals are so much healthier than humans. And
Hmm.
I'm often looking at the reasons why that might be. And if you think about it in terms of mindfulness, animals spend most of their lives in silence. Even a
Hmm.
yappy dog,
Hmm.
when they're not yapping, they're in silence.
Hmm.
Why are they healthier? Usually, wild animals are healthier than domesticated animals, but they're going outside. They're
Hmm.
getting fresh air, they're getting sunshine,
Hmm.
and they're getting that silence.
Hmm.
That I think it's a natural thing to get that.
Hmm. Yes.
But we,
Yeah.
we tend to drown that out with unnatural things like the
Hmm.
music, the TV,
Hmm.
everything else.
Hmm. Absolutely. And not to say that one can't get enjoyment out of sounds like music, or even watching a television show that interests you, or
Right.
listening to a podcast, right? These things are wonderful. This is what's so wonderful and juicy about life, is that we've got all of these great choices. However, when we overdo it and we neglect silence and we don't allow for silent moments in our lives, I honestly think that we're missing out on so much. It is, in many ways, the great healer is silence.
Yes.
And silence doesn't mean having to necessarily be in a complete vacuum. In fact, before I sat down today to speak with you, Cody, I sat out in my backyard. It's a beautiful day here today. The sun is shining. I have a little backyard. It's lovely and green. There's trees. And I just sat there and listened. And the birds are twittering, and I can hear there's a squirrel that lives in the tree in behind in our neighbor's tree, and I can hear it rustling around in the tree. And it was just such a wonderful moment. I had no desire to listen to anything other than the sounds of nature. I had no desire to read a book or look in my iPhone or do whatever, we as human beings normally do. I just sat there and listened to, quote unquote, the silence. But it wasn't 100% silent, but it was very restorative and very healing. It felt great. And that's what I'm talking about, is taking those moments of enjoying what the world offers to us in terms of non-human generated sound.
We aren't designed to worry about the future or dwell on the past.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yet,
Yeah.
so many of us find ourselves doing that. And quite often, I find that we are bouncing back and forth between the future and the past. But we're
Hmm.
skipping right over the present in the
Hmm.
process.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I teach people, instead of bouncing back and forth, it's okay to think about the future, it's okay to think about the past, but bring yourself to the present and try to be there most of the time.
Hmm. And that is a challenge. It's a real challenge, especially for people starting out with mindfulness practices, because when they sit still or lay down, or however they're silent walking, mindfully walking, they suddenly become aware of the magnitude of thoughts that they have. And as I call it, the top 10 favorites, because usually we are thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. The same, whatever it is that's occupying our future thoughts or our rumination about something in the past. There's maybe 10 things, maybe 5 things, and they will play over and over again in long or short snippets. But until we become mindful, we're not aware of those patterns. And until we become mindful, there's really not much we can actually do to resolve those things that are pulling us forward into the future or dragging us back into the past.
Hmm.
And that is a wonderful exercise to allow us to um, move forward in our lives, really.
I heard once that if somebody has a developmental disorder, mindfulness essentially can cure it
Hmm.
as long as they're practicing it consistently and regularly.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, essentially, you're training the brain to do what it was meant to do in the first place.
Yeah.
The more you
Hmm.
practice it, the more you're activating that neuroplasticity, changing neural pathways, and allowing the brain to do it, to follow its natural processes. And
Hmm.
I like to think about children. I think about how mindful they are naturally until they're socialized out of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
It does seem like it's a social phenomenon where, I mean, and trauma might be part of it too, but if you think about it, young children, before they go to school, they're in the moment, they're playing. If they get
Hmm.
hurt, quick, typically they bounce back from it pretty quickly.
Hmm.
But then as soon as they go to school and they're taught that they need to sit still,
Hmm.
focus on their assignments, worry about that book report that they have to do this Friday,
Hmm.
they start worrying more about the future. They start worrying more about their performance.
Hmm.
And if they make a mistake, they start worrying about the past.
Hmm.
And they grow up and they continue in that pattern until their mindfulness coach or their therapist or someone else says, "Hey, be mindful."
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's true, and it's particularly challenging for parents nowadays with the pressure of social media, the internet, all of the external things that 15 years ago were like a non-issue, and now it's a big thing, right? These distractions, and not all of them good. Now, don't get me wrong, the internet is fabulous. Look, you and I are sitting here today. You're in the United States, I'm in Canada. We're talking. Like, wow, that's amazing. That's fabulous.
Hmm.
But there are negative things that happen, as we all know, and we don't necessarily even need to name them. But these extra pressures on young children growing up makes it even more challenging and therefore even more important to give children the understanding that the way that they behave when they are young, to a great degree, is the way to be. As you said, to be in the moment, to offer children opportunities to just play, to be outside, to climb a tree, to go for a hike, or to learn to play an instrument and to just play with it, like have fun, or do some crafts of some sort, or have really interesting, creative conversations with them. Help them develop their creativity, their ability to imagine, and to think for themselves.
I think that's critical for adults too.
Yeah. Hmm.
As you're interacting with children, you're learning to do that yourself. But then I wonder if adults could just do that anyway without children facilitating that need.
Hmm. Hmm. I think many of us come to realize that, as you said, later on in life, as we become adults, and if we become aware of where we are in our lives and what's going on, what is serving us and what isn't serving us, our levels of self-satisfaction, our levels of self-confidence, or lack thereof, of either one of those, can be great markers or indicators to let us know where exactly are we in our lives. And I always like to say to people, there's always room for improvement. It's never over, in the sense, until you take your dying breath. There's always an opportunity to grow, to learn, to feel better about yourself, uh,
Mm.
and to be able to be resilient. Because I'm not telling people everything is like rosy glasses and all the world is going to be great once you're mindful. Crappy things will still happen. You will still stub your toe, and someone might just run into your car in the parking lot and drive away. Things like that happen. But when we become mindful and we build our mindful muscle, we also build along with it our ability to be resilient and resourceful.
Hmm.
And really, truly, what happens is instead of reacting immediately to situations that call for our strength, we learn to respond in a much more healthy and productive way. And that is one of the benefits of mindfulness.
If you're feeling like you would like to get started on a low carb or keto or carnivore or just a general whole food diet, you might be interested in my small group nutrition program. To learn more, go to beavercreekwellness.com/restart. You can also register there. So again, go to beavercreekwellness.com/restart to learn more. Interestingly, I think we can reduce physical pain with mindfulness as well. Have
Mhm.
you read the book The Celestine Prophecy?
Yes. Oh gosh. Yes. Years ago. Yes.
Oh, such a good
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Maybe it was The 10th Insight, which is the second book.
Hmm.
But they talk about how I'm not sure if they actually use the word mindfulness, but the author is basically teaching it through a
Hmm.
parable.
Hmm.
And he describes if you're just maybe you stubbed your toe to go with that example that you just shared,
Hmm.
you're feeling that throbbing pain.
Hmm.
And if you can sit with that mindfully, focus on it with a spirit of acceptance, that
Hmm.
acceptance can be very, very healing. And maybe the pain doesn't go away completely. Maybe it doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily physically heal you. But in most cases, I think that pain will reduce
Hmm.
because 90% of physical pain is actually in the mind.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. And to be aware of the fact that the pain is not necessarily a constant, but it changes. It can change in intensity, it can change in length. A stub toe is a perfect example. When you stub your toe, oh man, it really hurts for the first however long, minute or so. And then one would notice a decrease. And then uh, there might be some throbbing pain that comes and goes and comes and goes. And eventually the pain will go away until you put your shoe on, and then, oh, there's the pain again. So it's that recognizing that it's not necessarily a constant, that like
Mhm.
life, things change in intensity from highs to lows and the in betweens.
It's important to pay attention when we have physical pain or other physical symptoms. That's our body telling us something is wrong. And so having that mindfulness, that
Hmm.
awareness of our body can really benefit us in many ways because then we
Hmm.
then we'll pay attention and we'll say, "Hey, my body's
Hmm.
telling me something. What is it telling me?" And
Hmm.
you can further assess from there.
Hmm.
But we we live in a society that is just rampant with chaos, with noise, just a lot of ignoring of the symptoms.
Hmm.
And so, if we can just pay attention, we can do so much better.
We can absolutely, yeah, do so much better. Hmm.
Yeah. I like to say slow down on purpose.
Hmm.
And so maybe it's not that you're quitting your job or you're dropping to part-time hours,
Hmm.
but when you are doing your job or maybe when you're at home not working at your job, slow down. Don't be in
Hmm.
such a rush
Hmm.
because by slowing down, you are forced to pay attention, but
Hmm.
it's a good thing.
Yeah. And it's great that you brought that up because I recently just uploaded to my website a free ebook that anyone can download, and it's called The Power of the Pause. And it's exactly that theme that we're talking about, is taking these pauses, and they can last from 5 seconds to, what I talk about in the book is also a reset pause that can be something that can be done every 6 months or once a year, where you really take the time to be reflective and to understand your experiences that got you to where you are right now and where you potentially want to go. But building these little mini pauses into our day can be wonderfully restorative and very, very helpful. It breaks the cycle, as you said, of that rushing, rushing. My sister once told me a story. Because she was very aware that she was rushing. This is someone who, she's a single mom. She had 3 kids, and she felt like she was constantly going, 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 going. And one day she was in her kitchen and she was about to load the dishwasher, and she always felt that she had to do it really, really quickly because she had to move on to something else. So she
Mm.
said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to time myself and see how much time it actually takes me to load this dishwasher when I do it at a regular pace. And she said, I timed myself. It was 2 minutes. She said, 2 minutes out of my entire day. But in her mind, it was like, oh my God, this is taking me so much time. I have to do it faster, faster, faster. So when we actually slow down and notice, then we suddenly realize that there's a lot more time than what we actually are recognizing. We actually have more time.
Hmm. We have this illusion that we don't have time because we get distracted.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's thinking about the future, and I think that's the case for many of us. Is
hmm
that we're distracted by, oh, I need to make sure I remember to do this, send that email, uh, record that podcast episode,
hmm
or dwelling on the past for a lot of people too.
hmm
I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I had done this.
hmm hmm
But if we can cut out those distractions, life is going to be so much better.
Right. Or at least recognize them and recognize our pattern of repetitive thinking about the future or
Mhm.
ruminating about the past. Catastrophizing and rumination. Those are two strong, strong poles in people's lives. And as you said, sometimes people tend to be more. I'm more of a future thinker. When I notice my thought patterns, I'm thinking about what's going to be happening in the future, and and potentially worrying about it. But the future hasn't happened yet. And oftentimes, when I'm reflective about what actually happened, about the thing that I might have been worrying about, often it turned out much better than what I thought it was. So I have learned to recognize that as a pattern in myself. And when I catch myself doing it, I stop, I take a breath, I pause, I reset, and I start again. And I just essentially just let it go. I let it go as best I can. And the next time I notice I'm caught up in that thinking again, I will stop, I'll pause, take a breath, and reset.
I guess we haven't talked about this yet, but intentionally practicing mindfulness is a
hmm
very important component of the practice.
hmm
So, for example, I mean, you could easily become distracted if you're not being intentional about what you're doing.
hmm
So maybe you have some time in between meetings, so you pick up your smartphone and you start scrolling through TikTok or Instagram.
hmm hmm
The next thing you know, 20 minutes has passed.
hmm
Think about all that time you wasted. You could have loaded your dishwasher 10
hmm
times in that 20
hmm
minutes.
Yeah. Yes,
But
exactly. But it's
but
hard, Cody. It's
yeah.
hard. These are habitual things that have creeped into people's lives in modern times. Especially iPhones, and especially, Androids. They are, and let's not fool ourselves. They're designed that way. They're designed with all their bells and whistles and their sounds and their noises. Bing. Oh, there's a text. Oh, who's on it? Oh, ding ding. There's something else. They're designed that way on purpose to hold your attention and to
Mhm.
deliver to you whatever it is. They're highly addictive. And so it's interesting because I just recently, since about mid December, I set the intention to say, when I get up in the morning, I am not going to pick up my iPhone and I am not going to look at it until I have done all the things that I want to do in the morning. In other words, get up out of bed, you know, have a shower, get dressed, do all of that stuff. Write in my I have a gratitude journal that I write in my gratitude journal, go downstairs, have my coffee, and at that moment in time, that's when I will look at my phone. And I set that intention, and I'm still doing it. And I'll tell you, it feels really good. But you
Mhm.
have to be intentional with those types of goals that you set for yourself. And
Yeah.
also, like in mindfulness, when you slip up, if it happens, to not be down on yourself, just to recognize it and say, okay, well, today I picked up my iPhone as soon as I got up. Well, tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow I will
Mm.
set the goal post again and say, okay, here we go.
Yeah, great strategy. I know
Hmm.
I am one to check my phone first thing in the morning.
Hmm.
It's email. I don't use social media very much, but
Hmm.
I will check my email.
Yeah.
And I will waste a lot of time in the morning doing that. But if I were to be more intentional and do what you just described, I think my
Hmm.
morning would go a lot better. I'd be more
Hmm.
productive. I wouldn't be wasting so much time. And yeah, eventually I'd get to checking my email,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't be so distracted doing it.
Yeah.
What other
Yes.
strategies do you have to encourage people to get away from their addictive smartphones or other habits that might be causing
Hmm.
distraction?
Hmm. Well, I think first of all is to set that intent, first to recognize what it is, because everybody's different. I mean, yes, most of us have iPhones, so I would venture to guess that most people probably are on their iPhones more than they wish. One of the great things to do is there's a way to track on your iPhone to let you know how long you used it the week previous. And when you set that, I guarantee you will be shocked by how much you actually use your iPhone. Most people are not aware, as you said, you're scrolling, for 20 minutes or whatever. You have no idea. So
Mm.
first to become aware of it, then to understand, is that how you really want to be spending your time? If it is, and if that's what you want to do, great. That's great. Then you've achieved your goal. But if you recognize that maybe, when it's telling me I use my iPhone 5 hours a day, right? Then you think, really? Should I be on my iPhone 5 hours a day? Is there any way I could shave an hour off of that and use that hour to do something else, whatever it might be? I don't know. It could be anything. It could be going for a walk. It could be having a talk on the phone with a friend. Or maybe there's a really interesting movie that you want to watch with your significant other, and you say, hey, this is the time. Let's do it. Let's watch it. Or play with your kids or whatever. There's a multitude of things you could do in an
Mm.
hour instead of being stuck on your phone. So it begins with recognition and then intention to change, and then just doing your very best to stay with that intention.
I heard recently that the average American now spends 7 hours a day on screens and seven
Mhm.
minutes outside.
Yeah. Mm.
That is appalling. I mean, sometimes that's me,
Hmm.
but you have to have that awareness. You have to notice
Yes.
that it's a problem before you can change it. And sometimes it happens accidentally, but
Yeah.
change it intentionally because it's going to
Hmm.
be that much more powerful.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because there's a lot of information out there on how to live a healthy, productive, happy, balanced life. And we all know it and we all hear it. And yet, so many of us don't actually follow through. But I
Mhm.
really honestly believe that if you give yourself an opportunity to try it, that you will be pleasantly surprised and it might just stick. It might just stick. You might go, going for that walk yesterday was so great. I'm going to maybe do that once a week and set for yourself an achievable goal. If you say, well, I'm going to do that every single day, chances are you may not achieve it. But set yourself something that you really honestly could say, I could do that. I could do that. Yeah, I could do it once a week. I'll set the time. After work on a Monday, I'm going to go for a walk. Great. And when we experience these things, and all of a sudden we realize, why didn't I do this before? This is so great. Yeah.
So I was thinking about creativity, and a lot of people seem, especially with AI, we tend to lack the ability to create anymore. Do you think
Mhm.
mindfulness helps with that?
For sure. In fact, my graduate studies paper that I did was all about creativity and how mindfulness practices can support creativity and innovation. And sometimes when people think about creativity, they think, oh, yeah, well, that means painting or dancing or acting or singing or playing a musical instrument. And I say, yes, that's true. But we all need to be creative in our everyday lives. We need to problem solve constantly, either at work or at home or in our relationships. We are called upon to to do things in a different way every single day. An
Hmm.
example being, if you have to go somewhere, you've got to figure out how to get there, right? How do I get there? Or you're going to have a conversation with somebody new. What? How am I going to have that conversation? What are we going to talk about? And so, yes, mindfulness can help with that. In particular, I focused in that study on one type of mindful meditation, which is called open awareness meditation. And is, simply put, open awareness meditation is intentional mind wandering. It's to say, I'm going to intentionally allow my mind to wander. Now,
Hmm.
mind wandering has often been poo pooed in the realms of mindfulness as being something negative. People who mind wander tend to be more depressed, they tend to be disconnected from life and so on. And that might be. But what I'm saying is when you intentionally mind wander, when you say on purpose, I am going to allow my thoughts to come and go as they wish, magical things can happen.
And you're
Really
paying
wonderful.
attention to where your mind is wandering too.
Yes, yes. And so your creativity just goes, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's the main difference is you're either paying attention or you're not when your mind is wandering.
Right.
And if you're
Mm-hmm.
paying attention, it can be powerful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it really comes down to that, it's intentional attention. That's mindfulness.
Mm.
Intentional attention. When we do things with intention, on purpose, then it creates a shift that isn't there when we do things unintentionally.
Here's something too. I was doing some clinical research. I guess it's been a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for scholarly articles on ADHD. I wasn't even looking for anything about mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's been a passion of mine for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I found an article about ADHD, started reading it, and it talked about how typically ADHD medications are amphetamines, so they're stimulants. They work for people for a few years
Mm-hmm.
on average. And the reason it's only a few years is because the body builds a tolerance to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then at the end of the article, it started to compare that with mindfulness. And I was
Mhm.
pleasantly surprised, and it explained that ADHD medication might be effective for only a few years because you build a tolerance, but you never build a tolerance to mindfulness. It
Mhm.
is a lifelong practice, and it only gets better as you keep doing it.
That that is true. Mhm.
And no side effects either. I mean, you don't need insurance to practice mindfulness.
Nope.
You don't end up with kidney failure or liver problems or these other things that you might get from
Mm-mm.
medication.
Mhm.
No side effects, lifelong
Mhm.
practice, and it only gets better as you keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's true. And it because it allows you to truly recognize what's going on with you and with those around you and your environment. So you can respond in the most healthy way. You can be aware of what's going on in your mind and in your body and all around you. It reminds me of a quote by Viktor Frankl. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Mhm.
And he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
Mhm. And again, going back to the awareness, we have to be aware that that space exists
Yes.
and be
Mm-hmm.
intentional with how to use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that we have the power. I think a lot of people nowadays feel somewhat powerless. It's like everything else is running around them, and they have no choice. And what I say to people is the exact opposite, is you do have a choice. You always have a choice, and you do have power. You have the power to choose. You have the power to shape your life, regardless of your situation. Viktor Frankl, he was an Auschwitz survivor. This is a man who was in the worst of circumstances and was able, through his mental processes and his ability to respond to the situation that he was in, that helped him survive that. And that's an extreme example, but we can take the lesson from that and integrate it into our lives. I always say there is a choice available to us. And
Mhm.
if we intentionally guide our lives and listen to that inner voice of wisdom that's available to us in that silent pause, in that space, then we will inevitably profit from it. We will grow, and we will be more balanced and, dare I say, happier individuals in this world.
So, for my listeners who aren't practicing mindfulness, give it a try.
That's right.
It's a
Give it a try.
very simple thing to do. Like
Hmm.
you were saying, Pamela, earlier, it can be just starting with the breath.
Yeah.
But do you have any favorite apps or YouTube channels or other resources
Hmm.
that you like to point people to?
Hmm. There's a really great app that I have used myself. It's called Vital. Um, and in that app, you can actually create your own, it's AI generated. So to understand that that's where it's coming from. So AI is not the end all be all, but the interesting thing about this particular app is that you can create meditations based on what you want. And by meditations, I say it can be a mindful meditation, it can be a visualization meditation, it can be a confidence boosting meditation. There's a number of different types of meditation. You can choose if you want to have it in silence or with sound in the background. There's different voices, and these voices are real people. In fact, I personally know someone who's one of the voices. And you type in what it is that you want to achieve or focus on in your meditation. You can choose the length, and it creates it for you. And then if you like it, you can save it. So that's a really helpful tool. Um,
Mm.
and I'm often not one to recommend books per se, only because there's such a huge array of books on mindfulness. And everybody is slightly different. Some people like the more technical kind of books, and some people like, the ones that are more filled with quotes and images, and might be a kind of a journaling thing. But I say
Mhm.
go explore that at your local bookstore. Most bookstores have a whole section just on mindfulness. Um, and if you're interested, of course, on my website, which is www.yourmindandyou.com, I have recordings of meditations, very simple ones, 10-minute breathing meditation, an open awareness meditation. They're free. You can listen to them there and or watch them, not watch them, but listen to them on YouTube. Um, and of course, I mentioned it earlier as well, my free ebook, which is The Power of the Pause. And that has some really good exercises in it, very simple, very easy to follow, very easy to implement, to maybe kickstart your delving into mindfulness. And included in that ebook is what I call the 7-day pause challenge. So it's just a 7-day, very simple thing that you can follow that will help you integrate little mindful pauses into your day. gives you a bit of space to do some journaling if you like, but gives you some suggestions on how you can build little mindful moments into your day over a span of 7 days to sort of, as I say, kickstart your mindful practice.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And since you already shared your website, I have one more question for you, Pamela.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
you could change one thing about the way people approach health and wellness, what would it be? It doesn't necessarily have to be about mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
or if that's what pops into your mind, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. One thing, well, gosh, there's so many things, but I think it begins with awareness. When you become aware of what you are allowing into yourself, and be it food, drink, what you're visually seeing, what you're hearing, your relationships, your job, when you become aware of what you are allowing to influence your life, you then will ultimately recognize those things that are serving you well and those things that are not serving you well. And that's where you have the opportunity and the power to make a choice.
Great. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Cody. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you very much. And thank you for having me on your podcast.
If you want to support this podcast, go to kofi.com/CodyCox. That's ko-fi.com/CodyCox. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review. That really helps me out. And also subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Real Food Mental Health is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information presented on this podcast is not intended to replace any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While I am a healthcare provider, I am not your provider. Always seek the advice of an appropriate healthcare practitioner with any personal questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on information provided by this podcast is at your own risk.